Solly, can we have roll call, please?
Broadway.
Here.
Harvey.
Here.
Holmes. Here. Mackey.
Here.
Rohan.
Here.
Trevus. Good morning. Euler.
Okay, and with that, we're going to go into closed session.
For the items listed on the agenda.
Oh, for the items listed on the agenda. All right. Agenda review. Does anybody have anything on the agenda they want changed?
Not for me.
All right, can I get a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Excuse me.
Aye.
There's a slight change to the resolution number.
Oh.
First resolution
Yes.
from 1801 to 1820.
All right. Okay, so we got to get that in there for the agenda thing, 1820. Presentation. And like said, this has been changed to 1820. Jim Holmes.
Well, thank you. It's my great honor to be asked to present this.
Supervisor, you want to light up your microphone so we can hear you now at this time? Thank you very much, appreciate that. I know that you're new to these chambers.
That's right, yeah. It's my first day. Okay, this is in the matter of a recognition of Executive Director Celia McAdam, resolution number 1820. The following resolution was duly passed by the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency at a regular meeting held June 27, 2018. There were no votes. It was all unanimous. So, whereas Celia McAdam has served as Executive Director for the PCTPA since 1998. Whereas Ms. McAdam's dedication, leadership, expertise, enthusiasm have been a guiding force for the improvement of transportation systems in Placer County, and whereas Ms. McAdam has been a chief proponent of the strong consensus building amongst the jurisdictions on transportation issues and priorities that have been key to the PCTPA success. Whereas, though Ms. McAdam's efforts, guidance, and consensus building, PCBA, it's through, not though, through Ms. McAdam's efforts, could you make this print a little bit smaller next time? Whereas through Ms. McAdam's efforts, guidance, and consensus building, PCTPA has accomplished the following during her tenure. Establishment of the South Placer Regional Transportation Authority in 2002, which will generate more than $191 million to key transportation projects over 20 years. Championed compatibility of local airports with surrounding land use and ensured the ongoing viability of Placer's 3 airports. Established the Freeway Service Patrol in 2006, which provides the most cost-effective tool in combating freeway congestion on Interstate 80 and Highway 65 by assisting and removing stalled vehicles. Weathered funding feasts and famines, complex regulatory requirements, and consistently changing processes to successfully plan, program, fund, and/or construct major transportation facilities, including intermodal rail stations at Roseville, Rockland, Loomis, Auburn, Colfax, Highway 49 safety and operational improvements, 2004, the I-80 Douglas interchange improvements, 2005, the I-80 bottleneck phase 1, 2007, the I-80 Sierra College Boulevard interchange, 2008, the Placer Parkway Tier 1 EIS program, EIR, 2009, the IA bottleneck phases 2 and 3, 2011, Highway 65 Lincoln Bypass Phase 1, 2012, Highway 65 Lincoln Bypass Phase 2, 2014, I-80 SR interchange, SR65 interchange Phase 1 EIR, EIA, 2016. Worked tirelessly to deliver the 11.7-mile Highway 65 Lincoln Bypass in October 2012, the longest stretch of new highway in California in a decade. And whereas Ms. McAdams is known statewide for her perseverance in negotiating deals, locating and securing scarce funding agreements, delivering projects on time and under budget, and repeating this process over and over. Whereas Ms. McAdam has created a positive work environment by being a role model and supportive motivator, and she will be deeply missed by the board and staff. And whereas Ms. McAdam has molded PCTPA into a lean, proactive, and results-oriented agency whose characteristics will continue after her retirement. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency that Celia McAdam is hereby commended for her outstanding dedication and service to the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Congratulations.
That's how limited the agency is. We don't have a photographer.
You too, Jim.
I'm going to say what I can't say how much this means to me. You know, I've spent pretty much my whole career here at PCTPA, and I can say it's been a roller coaster at times, but I'm so proud of what we've been able to achieve together. And I have to emphasize together between the staff, the board, all of your staffs, the public, the business community, everybody has worked together to make the improvements that we've made, and I'm really proud of that. And so on the idea of being, you know, on time and on budget, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celia. Thank you, Jim, for reading that.
Mr. Chair, if you could have a vote on the resolution?
Okay.
Can we get a motion?
Let's just get a motion.
Can we get a motion to approve that resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I thought we did that.
You did one, didn't you?
That's okay.
Okay, all right. Got it? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain?
Director Tribus has a comment.
Okay.
Please, Celia, I would like to, from all the community of North Lake Tahoe, really make it clear to you that we have appreciated your sometimes behind the scenes, but sometimes in front of the scenes even, help to the North Lake Tahoe area that isn't always in the forefront of the whole Placer County, although it is with the Board of Supervisors, of course. But your work with us to make sure that we were considered and our different needs were considered in Measure M, the helping to get Mr. Garner and Placer County to be able to get Highway 267 open from Lake Tahoe to the town of Truckee so the folks could go to the hospital and other things like that. And then our Transportation Summit attendances that we have really, and I particularly have appreciated your advice in our movement toward better transportation planning and systems that we have at the lake. Thank you very much.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, you might want to open it up to the public to see if there's any.
Anyone from the public have any comments? No? With that, all right.
Any comments on this or comments on the whole meeting?
No comments on just this. All right, next we're going to go to public comment. Please do not discuss the short-range transit plans or anything else that's on this agenda for public comment. This is for new things that are not on this agenda. And you have 3 minutes. So with that, we're opening public comment. Does anybody have any comments? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment. So now we're going to go to item H, the draft short-range transit plans. And now this is a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Now, does anybody have any comments on this one?
Mr. Chair, staff has a report on the item
Okay.
as well.
Good morning, David Milko, and I'll be addressing this item. So we're asking you to conduct a public hearing for Auburn Transit, Placer County Transit, Roseville Transit, and the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, or CTSA, for their draft short-range transit plans. So we've spent a lot of time before this board over the past several months talking about short-range transit plans. And so just as a recap, we hired LSE transportation consultants to update our short-range plans. They were last completed in 2011. We spent a long time before the board in April talking about the existing services, the productivity of those services. We had a lot of input from the public regarding proposed alternatives. We presented those, came back in May, we refined those alternatives. We presented what we called high potential alternatives, and we noted key findings, and we identified costs associated with those alternatives. And we also, at that particular May meeting, had the opportunity for more public comment. So at this point, as of June 15th, we have draft and complete short-range transit plans. They're available on our website, and they're also identified within the staff report at pctpa.net/SRTP draft plans. You all have executive summaries that are part of your attachment. And the public comment period for the short-range plans runs from June 15th to July 15th, so it's a 30-day review. We've had 9 comments submitted so far, and all the comments will be considered. I can't guarantee that all the comments will be incorporated, but we will address all of the comments as part of finalization of the plans, and we will be back before the board in August asking for your acceptance of those plans. Just as in parallel to this, you'll notice on the consent calendar there is a task amendment to amend LSE's contract for an additional amount because we need to have more meetings with the short-range transit plan operators to conduct what, I'm going to date myself here a little bit, we call kind of like little mini charrettes with the transit operators. We need to be able to go through the plans and make sure that everybody is on the same page with respect to what's in the plans, so that when we get to the final plans will be useful for the operators, as well as be able to respond to the public comments. So that was an additional task that we felt was worthwhile, and so the money is there, and so that's what that task agreement is for. So today is a public hearing, and we have, as I mentioned, short-range plans. They contain the recommendations that were included and presented to the board in May with regard to service and capital. The short-range plans identify the costs and propose various funding ideas with respect to funding those high potential alternatives. And at this point, I would just note that if there's any questions, I guess you can ask me. Otherwise, I recommend you go into public hearing, take public comment, close the public hearing, and then we move forward.
Anybody have any comments? No? All right, so now we're going to public hearing. Does anybody have any public comments on the short-range transit plans?
We're debating who's coming up first. Good morning. I'm Tink Miller. I'm Executive Director at Placer Independent Resource Services here in Auburn. We serve people with disabilities, the majority of whom at this point in our history are seniors. And the point I really want to bring to your attention is the aging of our population in our county, which is at an accelerated rate in comparison not only to the rest of the state, but the rest of the country. The Commission on Aging for this county has done studies around needs, and in looking at the demographics, their report is that by 2020, which is a year and a half away, almost 30% of the population of this county will be over age 60. So the need for the transportation that's provided through Western Placer CTSA is going to grow, because a lot of those folks, as they age, are going to develop disabilities, and they're not going to be able to drive. They're going to need paratransit and dollar ride type services. So that's really the thing I want to bring to your attention, and urge that as these plans move forward and get budgeted from year to year, that the allocation of funding to the Western Placer CTSA is restored to 5%, which it was before the recession. It was reduced to 4% at that time, and that's understandable why it was. But we have new money coming in, and it's time to put it back up to 5% so that we can get ready to meet this need that's right at our doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Janice LaRue with the First Five Placer Children and Families Commission, and I echo Tink's statement about the request to move it back up to 5%. In reviewing the short-range transit plan, we were especially happy to see the concentration around the I-80 corridor. This is where, in our recent examination of needs for families with young children, has been the greatest deficit. One community that we're specifically concerned about is Colfax, and our families up there, we get service once in the morning and once in the afternoon, but at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is not really compatible for families who are working with young children. And that's one of the areas in the county where we see the greatest concern about the needs of families with young children. So that's something that we'd like to at least put a note in with respect to the plan, and I'll put that in writing as well and submit it to staff. Also is a concern for services up in Tahoe and the lake. That's a perpetual concern for families, so I appreciate the board's attention to that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Any more comments from the board?
I do have a comment, and David, I believe you were provided with a copy of a letter that I received from a resident of Rockland commenting regarding the bus route and a potential change, something to consider relative to the Lincoln Sierra College Boulevard route. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, that there was a request that we look at how the bus route currently flows along Industrial versus the development that's taken place on the opposite side of 65 with University Avenue, and still making some of those primary connections. So I would just ask that we take a look at this and incorporate this into our discussions as we move forward and look at the changes that are available.
Okay, will do.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else from the board have any comments? All right, with that, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. Anything from staff on the consent calendar?
No, sir, we recommend you adopt it as presented.
Okay, any comments from the board? Any comments from the public? All right, with that, can I get a motion to accept the consent calendar?
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we're going to adjourn as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and convene as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. The first item is the item J, the consent calendar. Anything from staff on that one?
No, sir, we recommend as presented in the agenda.
Okay. Anything from the board? From the public? All right, with that, can I get a motion? All in favor? Aye. Next item is K, the 2018-19 budget.
I have this item here. So we have, this is a twofold action item. We're asking the CTSA Board to adopt the fiscal year 2018-19 budget, and we're also requesting that you authorize the Executive Director to negotiate and sign a partnership agreement with Seniors First for the My Rides and the Health Express programs. So, a little background. The CTSA must adopt an annual budget. The budget and the programs that are shown on the budget sheet, which is attachment 1, are all programs identified in the current short-range plan for the CTSA, and will in fact be the same programs identified in the forthcoming CTSA plan that's currently out for public review. So that's with respect to the budget. On the Seniors First partnership agreements, we first entered into a partnership agreement with Seniors First back in November 2008 for the My Rides and the Health Express programs. And for those who have been on the board for a long time, they can remember that at one point in time, the CTSA used to be administered by Pride, and Pride then gave us a notice to withdraw service, and in 4 months' time, we had to scramble, and we put together, after extensive public output and input, the CTSA, which is you all here. And then we entered into an agreement with Seniors First to deliver those 2 programs, which have been successful over the years. So the My Rides program relies on volunteers to provide transportation for seniors and persons with disabilities, as well as First 5 families who have children that fall in the age range of prenatal to age 5. And the staff report notes that they provide 3,600 rides, and that's correct. But in terms of the number of riders, it's way over 6,000 number of riders. And so that's an omission in the staff report. So it just shows that in terms of last year, we provided quite a bit of rides as well as riders. And under the Health Express program, Seniors First administers and provides the client management, determines the eligibility of clients and people who can use those services, and then conducts the registration and works with the call center in scheduling those rides. And as of last year, we had over 6,000 rides on Health Express. So, and just in terms of where the 6,000 rides on Health Express, how that sort of in context, when there was a Lincoln dollar ride provided by the City of Lincoln, that was about the same amount of rides that the City of Lincoln provided on their dollar ride services. So it just kind of gives you a perspective there. So attachment 1 provides the 18-19 budget, and the operating revenues are a little over 1.8 million, and that's a decrease of about 5%, and that's due to various fiscal year adjustments, particularly to carryover and interest income, and a decline in some of the match revenues provided by Seniors First. The operating expenditures total about almost 1.5 million, and that's a decrease of about 13% from the prior fiscal year budget as amended. We are projecting a budget surplus of 367,000. I'm rounding up over into 1920. And in addition to that, we note here in the staff report that the Transit Operator Working Group will be working and reviewing the CTSA short-range plan in addition to the other short-range plans. And as you heard from the public comment, there are some people who wish to see the CTSA allocation go from 4% to 5%. So the current short-range plan that's out on the street for the CTSA has 2 scenarios. It has a 4% scenario and a 5% scenario. And under the 4% scenario, basically it shows that starting in fiscal year 2021, that the CTSA will have a deficit if we continue with these existing programs, because costs are increasing over time because of inflation, and also because costs are increasing for the call center. And so the way to address that, one, is to increase it to 5%, and the short-range plan shows then that you have surpluses under that 5% scenario. Another way to address it is to control costs, and so we'll have discussions with the transit operators about that, and we may need to cap costs and come up with maybe an in-between scenario of 4.5% or something like that. But what I wanted to basically point out to the board is that we will be discussing this topic, and it'll be a lively debate in July, and there'll probably be more than one meeting on this subject before we get back to the board here in August. With respect to the partnership agreement, the existing partnership agreement expires here in June, and we recommend continuing with the partnership agreement for another 6-year period. It's a fixed term of 3 years that we're proposing, and then 3 option years. Seniors First brings a variety of unique funding sources to the table. They bring hospital funding contributions from Sutter and Kaiser, who fund in their part with the Health Express program. And that's rather unique here in California. They also bring Area 4 Agency on Aging, I got that right, with respect to the MyRides program. And so that also is a unique funding opportunity. And so with that, the total combined cost on an annual basis is about $373,000 and change, and Seniors First brings about 40% of those revenues to the table to match our monies towards that total cost. So the partnership agreement and the budget were reviewed by the Transit Operator Working Group and the PCTPA TAC, and both recommend and concur with the staff recommendation, and so we recommend approval.
Okay, any comments from the board?
No questions.
Questions? Any comments or questions from the public?
Thank you, Tink Miller again. The need is going to expand. And the fact that this program at 4% would go into deficit and that services would be curtailed is just unthinkable. It needs to grow, not contract, and it needs to go to 5%. And at this time, I don't believe there's any jurisdiction represented in this board where 100% of their transportation money goes to transportation. And that's what it's for, first and foremost. And these services are for people most in need in our communities, and it needs to be funded properly. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, with that, I'm going to bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair. David, you're going to be meeting with the transit operators about the 4% versus 5%. And does that mean with each individual jurisdiction?
Well, it'll be a group discussion, and when I say transit operators, it actually, for Placer County, it involves all of their partner jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. So Colfax, Loomis, and Rockland, and Lincoln will all be invited. You know, okay. Well, we've scheduled a meeting, and so it's on everybody's calendar, and so everybody will be part of that discussion.
And how long before you bring it back to this board?
Well, we will come back to the board with the CTSA short-range plan in August. Okay. Now, the current draft plan shows 4% and 5% and recommends that at some point the CTSA board will need to make a decision as to whether to go to 5% based on just the math. But the math, when you look at the math in the CTSA, you don't need to make that decision until 2021. So I'm just kind of giving you a heads up that this is a discussion that will be out there. So when the CTSA board adopts the short-range plan, you don't need to necessarily make a decision on 4% or 5% at that point in time. You can, if you so desire, and there'll be maybe public input recommending you to do that. However, the flexibility is built into the plan to allow for either way. And so we have that flexibility in the plan, and so just put that out there.
All right, thank you.
And eventually, we would bring that back to you as part of the budget process.
Right.
Kind of roundabout, is there any out-of-the-box thinking on how we can lower the cost of the call center?
Well, that will be a primary point of discussion. You know, and so Roseville has put together a first attempt in terms of identifying the costs and all of the costs, and it's identified over a 5-year period. And we'll just need to, we've had a session where we've sat down with all of the jurisdictions, including Placer County's partner jurisdictions, Colfax was present, and a lot of questions to understand the costs and why costs are increasing. And so we've had that discussion, so everybody now has the facts, and so now we have to kind of have a meeting to talk about how we can manage costs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? This is an action item.
Mr. Chair, I move adoption of fiscal year 2018-19 budget and authorize the executive director to negotiate and sign a partnership agreement with Seniors First Incorporated for the minor rides and college express programs.
I second that.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain? All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn as the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agent and convene as the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. We're going to go on to item I, Legislative Strategy. Sales Tax District.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and members of the Board of Directors. Do a quick report on this item. This is a strategy that the board had asked for in terms of proposing a legislative strategy to move forward with the sub-county district for the sales tax measure for transportation projects in Placer County. As you recall, the board took action on the 2018-2019 legislative strategy, which included this item. We're recommending this morning that you reaffirm that legislative strategy, and we've attached a little enhanced detail in the form of a letter of June 4th from Smith, Watson, Hartman in terms of how we would go about pursuing a coalition of partners to formulate that strategy during the summer and fall of 2018, and then proposed legislation in January of 2019, then taking most of 2019 to move through the state process with that coalition, also finding a bill author along the same timeline. The second item in the action requested is the PCTPA had hired the firm of TBWB for an outreach consulting for a future transportation measure and to support transportation projects in Placer County. That contract was put on hold with the legislation last year and its lack of moving forward. And so we're asking you this morning to authorize staff to release TBWB from that contract as we're not moving forward at that time, and then to look at the possibility of circulating an RFP this fall for the same types of services to do a comprehensive update of that contract, and also to assign 2 board members to that process. You have on your dais this morning some correspondence from the Building Industry Association and Mr. Tallhammer regarding this proposed item. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Tallman, excuse me.
A couple questions. First of all, assuming that we were successful next year in establishing the boundaries of a special district, is that for an indefinite period of time, that approval, or must action subsequently be taken on a measure within that district within a period of time, or does that district, once established, just remain in perpetuity? Do we know?
At this time, the legislation would allow that to occur on a statewide basis, and so that opportunity would exist for us to take action, and then the board could take action then on putting a measure on the ballot using the authority that was already created by the board.
Okay, maybe I didn't make my question clear. What we're asking for is for a legislation that enables us to create a district that is not coterminous with our current county boundaries, right? A special district within.
Correct.
My question is if we are successful in the legislative effort to get the authority to create that district? Number one, does the legislation create the district, or does it give us the authority to create the district at some other point?
The latter, the authority.
Okay, so we have the authority to create the district at some point. Okay. How does that process work? How does that district get created? Does this board draw boundaries? Do we know how that goes, how that happens?
Yes, it depends upon the exact language of the final adopted legislation.
Okay.
But assuming it was similar to what was proposed last year through San Diego County, assuming that's similar language, yes, the board would then have to take action to decide what those boundaries were and work with the jurisdictions within the county to decide what that boundary is, and then the process by which we would place the actual measure on the ballot.
Okay, and do you know, is there a clock on that? If the legislation is adopted and signed by the governor next year, must we take action within a certain amount of time to create the district?
No.
Okay.
No, it would simply enable counties.
Okay.
Including Placer.
At no point does it say that this authority expires if it is not used. If we don't exercise that right, then the authority expires. It leaves it open in perpetuity for us to establish the district, and then having established the district, at some subsequent date, then to put a measure forward should we so choose.
At least in this early, what we think the legislation is going to say.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. I just didn't know if and that's my only concern. I'm fully supportive of moving forward with the legislative process to create the opportunity for us to create the district at some point. But if we were forced to then subsequently move within a time frame, that's my concern. Which leads me to the one concern that I do have, and that is on your recommendation to move forward with selecting a new outreach firm. I have no problem with the recommendation to release the other outreach firm. My concern is we don't know enough right now about what the political landscape will look like. I think we need to wait until after November before we have a conversation about finding a new outreach firm, because whomever we hire is going to be doing the outreach in that post-November environment. And as we know, there are an awful lot of things that are going to be discussed, both in this county and at the state level, regarding tax measures and transportation-related dollars and all the rest on this November ballot. And I think whomever this board ends up hiring we have to be comfortable that they can operate in an environment that has yet to be determined. So that would be my recommendation, is that we go ahead and release these folks. That's great, but let's wait on hiring somebody until after we see what happens in the November election. That'd be my suggestion.
I would like to ask staff, do I need to keep holding this button?
No.
Okay.
You just push
I would
it.
like to ask the staff if there's anyone here on the legislative side of this who can comment to Kirk's assumption that there's going to be a significant shift in the winds next January. But the part of what I'm thinking is that the skill set of the firm that this organization would hire is what is significant, not necessarily the theme of what their message is. They're not being interviewed on the theme of their message. And that there are advantages, it seems to me, to being ready to go into play when you need to, as opposed to waiting for that RFP process. So I'd like to examine, first of all, some of the premises.
Okay. And I'm happy. No, I know, and I'm happy to share what the most recent poll that I'm aware of, LA Times did, shows the gas tax failing with 54% vote opposed. The Placer County, if statewide, where Republican registration is at 25%, decline to state is at 24%, and Democrats at 46%. If statewide it's losing 54%, then here in Placer County, where our Republican registration is actually 44%, I would anticipate it's going to lose more substantially here in Placer County. All I'm saying is any messaging that we do ought to be done understanding who our audience here is here in Placer County. And I'm not confident that we were that successful in our previous efforts at messaging here in Placer County with some previous consultant work that was done. And I just want to be sure that we understand what the real lay of the land is here in this county before we start any kind of a public outreach campaign. That's all I'm saying.
I think my light is still on, yes? I think that there's an opportunity this time for the messaging to include another audience, and it may be the counties and the legislators that we would need to work with in order to get support in the legislature in 2019. So it seems to me that the scope of work is just a little bit different this time. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I want to get some sense from staff that this may be a slightly different tactic than last time.
Yes, I think we're recommending that we learn from, what happened in 2016, that the consultant that we would hire would be put in place at the timeline selected by the board, but the effort would be to promote transportation projects in general, to promote what we're doing already, what we've done well, promote the delivery of phase 1 of Highway 65 I-80, and really to capitalize upon the impact of these improvements on the local economy to an even greater extent than was done in 2016. So
may I, point of clarification, because Susan seems to be
Talking something
referencing
different.
lobbying. I'm referencing quote-unquote public outreach like we conducted for 2 years prior to going out with our sales tax. Which are we talking about? Are we talking about a lobbying for the legislation to create the district, or are we talking about true public outreach to create support within Placer County for something?
well, both. We item 1 would be to
Understand, but where I'm specifically talking about is in the discussion where it says staff proposes to release previously hired from their and staff requests 2 board members proposed to blah, blah, blah. Is that for lobbying in advance of item 1, or is that for public outreach and education like we did for 2 years prior to the prior sales tax?
the latter.
Okay, and that's my concern. My concern is that this is not to hire a lobbyist to help us get the legislation.
I'm not talking about lobbying, I'm talking
You're
about
talking about-
helping the messaging for the lobbying.
Okay, and you,
So it's almost like a two-phase work, but
They could
perhaps
help,
the
yes,
option
they
here-
could help each other, yes.
okay.
Perhaps the option here is to come back with something that is a proposed RFP, what is actually the scope of work. I would appreciate that you would consider that, because we shouldn't lose any time this time. And be ready to go. And if the board is happy with the kind of, the scope of work that we're looking to put out, I think that we should get ourselves ready.
Sure, staff we could put together scope work for your consideration.
Let's see what the rest of the folks think.
Any comments from this side of the board?
I don't know if it's of any value, but we're at the eastern side of Placer County going through this right now. That back in 2000, we had a bill that went through the California Senate authorizing the North Lake Tahoe Transportation
Right.
Authority. And we didn't, and that had a couple of things in there that I think Kurt mentioned, that this authority had no time limit to it, and it could go out to get a sales tax up to 0.5%, and for the for the life of 20 years. And that showed a structure for this authority who would be involved in it in order to be able to make the recommendations and do the transportation plan that must accompany any sales tax proposal. This year, and after Measure M, we felt a lot, and this was in conjunction, of course, with Placer County. In fact, they're leading this right now. That authority needed some revision to it, the makeup of the authority, and to expand it. It was written specifically for transit programs, and now it's transportation-related projects and programs to be able to take in some sort of pedestrian things or trails or whatever, as well as transportation. And we found an author to include that in an existing bill going through on transportation in Berkeley. And it has now gone through the Assembly, and it's in the Senate. It's gone through the Governance and Finance. And we made a couple changes in there that did include now no limitation to the authority, but it could propose a tax and get it passed for up to 1% as well as 30 years. And the intent was that should be approved, and there's even a possibility of still, although I think we'll miss it, getting on this November's ballot ahead of that. And what we're doing as backup to that is, in fact, I think that could be going out today from Placer County, is a survey of the residential in that area to find out the existing temperature of the potential for this versus a couple other types of revenue increases. And what we felt is we needed to have that close to when we would be doing the election, so we're not doing it as happened before, 2 years out, and then we did one a little bit later than that and whatever. But we've gone through doing a review of those questions, the survey type questions, so we could feel we would have the opportunity for this November, if we can get there this November. But that's just to the North Lake Tahoe area of Placer County, that authority. So it can be done. We got to get an author to write it, or to sponsor it in the Assembly and/or the Senate. But we're moving forward with that. But those limitations are in there for the actual length and amount that could be collected, but not for the longevity of the authority. Sorry to go on.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So, in order to move forward, I think it's critical that we lay the groundwork for forming the sub-district. Supervisor Euler's concern is that we should wait till after the election to hire someone to help us move forward in that direction.
Not with the sub-district, no.
Not with the sub-district, but
But with the public I'm sorry, I should have turned this on. My concern is that we wait till after November for making a decision on whom we hire for our messaging within Placer County for the purpose of educating folks about our needs in Placer County.
so we'd be.
But we could develop a scope of work now, I think. We could do all that good stuff. My only concern is I would want to make sure that we make any hiring decision on who's going to be doing our messaging fully informed by the message the voters send us in November. That's all I'm saying.
All right, so it'd be premature to hire a consultant before the election in November.
I believe. That's just my opinion. I believe that's the case. However, like I said, I think we can move forward with developing what we think the scope of work is going to need to be, put out the request for proposals, all that good stuff. But I wouldn't want to, my sense is, I think that we need to be fully informed by what the voters tell us in November before we select somebody for that messaging moving forward. That's all I'm saying.
I was really impressed with TBWB when we interviewed them and hired them. They've been successful. I don't know why we would wait to hire them. I just don't understand that unless there's some political thing that I don't understand. I would just as soon hire TBWB, another hand. That's we got to move forward with the district, but let's have someone on board that can help us message that.
Well, this recommendation is that we release them and go through the process of finding somebody new.
Right.
You're saying let's not do that. Let's
No,
just keep
no,
them
that's
open.
fine, we have to do that, but I
Oh.
think certainly TBWB would reapply. I have
Right.
confidence that they will. So that would be my recommendation,
Okay.
I recommend staff recommendation.
Okay.
Ken, do you have anything?
Yeah, I guess my concern, Kirk, is just simply what benefit do we get? I'm not sure I understand your concerns on what the election may provide us, if you're feeling that the selection of the firm would be different based on the outcome of the election. You're thinking that that would drive?
I think that depending on how the vote goes in Placer County, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, it may very well affect how we message what we message in our public outreach. That is exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think from the messaging standpoint, I agree with you that it may change the messaging, but I don't know that it would change my position on necessarily who we would select, because we're going to provide direction relative to what that messaging needs to be. And my concern is, I don't want to fall behind, and I think delaying in the selection may have us fall a bit behind in keeping this process moving forward. So that's why I would be more in favor of moving forward, ensuring we're selecting, and then we provide the direction on what that messaging looks like.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right, so now it's my turn, right? Well, I have to agree with Kirk because, as you know, up in Colfax, it went down in flames last time. But after SB 1, and the way people have seen it and the people I've talked to, if that goes down, I think the people of Colfax will be more willing to vote for this. It is, they've seen this big monstrosity take over the money. And I think on a local level where it would be managed better, that they would be, so, you know, to even decide who's gonna be in the district before the election, I would have a problem with. So, that's my input on that. And if no more comments, I'm gonna open it up to the public. Any public comment?
Good morning, I'm Mike Garabedian for the Sierra Club. I wanted to address, point out that the Sierra Club has taken a position opposed to the ballot measure to repeal, not all of, but part of SB 1. We haven't decided what we would be doing in Placer County on that, but we know statewide we're opposed to that repeal.
But that, yeah, that isn't part of this, though.
It was part of your discussion,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Marcus LaDuca here today on behalf of the North State Building Industry Association. Our Director of Government Affairs has submitted a letter to you regarding this special legislation effort that is part of the staff report before you. As you know, the BIA and its members were strong supporters of Measure M, and that measure's proposed strong local control of transportation dollars moving forward. We think your effort here relative to pursuing special legislation, given the very strong support in South Placer for that measure and for that local control, is indicative that you should proceed forward to seek such legislation in partnership with other jurisdictions in the state, and also in partnership with private entities and organizations such as the BIA, and we stand ready to be supportive of all your efforts in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Could I make one more comment, please?
Okay.
And that's that what I think is important in this whole, I think that it could be, we could move ahead in looking or doing the process to find someone to do outreach. But I think that outreach needs to await, and it probably would time-wise, is what I thought when I read this, after this election. And as I'm sensing this, any election for this is going to be a year from this November, probably, or maybe summer could be. But we wouldn't want to be doing the outreach program now. But as far as taking proposals or interviews, that could be occurring, I think, but not to be doing the outreach program. I guess the other point in there then, I'm doing my own back and forth here, is that if the selection of an outreach firm might be based on the situation after the election this year to see where everybody sits, that could say, well, let's wait till then. But I think we could look for a good firm prior to that, with that message to them and in the interview process of.
That's a great question.
Yeah. So that's my only feeling. I think we could be doing the process now to find the outreach, but not determining what that program is until we see the climate after this year's election. It's too far in front of any vote to be doing an outreach program that we don't know what the approach should be.
To be sure, any firm that we decide to hire, those questions will be asked of them
Yep.
about what their vision is for the coming election and what they put in place to address those issues. So I have no problem with doing the outreach. It'll be probably to hire a new firm, but it's probably in August or September before we hire them, and that's going to be close enough. So, anybody that does this type of work is going to be reading the tea leaves and looking at the polls and everything to address which way we should go. So
we want to be
I would
ready.
just,
We want to be ready.
I would just recommend staff's recommendation. Also, did you need to appoint do we need to appoint two staff members from the jurisdictions today? Or do
Yes, sir, that would be our desire. We could also, taking into account the board's comments today, we could certainly build in a workshop with the board post-election as well into the process. So knowing the board's desire to potentially make an adjustment to the message and other components, at the November meeting or the December meeting, we certainly could build in a workshop to modify things as affected by the election.
So will this board make the selection of the board members, or do they go to the cities and the cities recommend?
We would bring it to this board for hiring the firm, but we certainly, through the TAC, and we would certainly run it through them to get their input as well.
But you want two board members from this board to be part of it?
As we did before, yes.
Right. So are the cities going to appoint the board members, or that are going to apply to?
It would be this board would appoint
Okay.
the board
All right,
members.
just checking. All right, good.
The other item, just to clarify, is that the district boundaries would be something that would happen way past the election.
Right.
So that wouldn't be until after the legislation is approved, and it's very likely we wouldn't have the legislation approved by the governor until late summer 2019 at the earliest. So,
Which governor?
yeah, whichever governor that will be there.
Sorry.
We're not deciding the two board members today, though, right?
No. Oh, we could.
No, you don't have to today. No.
All right, any more comments? All right,
I do have a question.
okay.
You're going to, if this action moves forward, you will begin developing the coalition amongst the counties to provide support for this legislation?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right. No waiting on that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that all?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to make a motion.
Okay,
That's right. I would authorize the executive director to proceed with forming a coalition and obtaining an author for the proposed legislation allowing a sub-county sales tax district, and to release the firm of TBWB from their current contract and circulate a request for proposal in the fall of 2018 for outreach services to support transportation projects in Placer County in anticipation of a future transportation sales tax measure.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The motion passes. And excuse me, that was L. I didn't have my glasses on, so that's why I said aye. Put them on this time. Item M, draft final Placer County Regional Bikeway Plan acceptance.
Thank you, Board Chair. I will be taking this. Aaron Hoyt, Senior Planner. So today, I'm excited to present to you the draft final Regional Bikeway Plan for Placer County. This is a culmination of approximately 1 year's worth of work with our consultant, with our Bicycle Advisory Committee, the Technical Advisory Committee, making presentations to municipal advisory committees throughout the county, and working with the public to identify how we update the regional bikeway plan moving forward, and how we set the stage and the vision for implementing, finding money for bicycle projects in the unincorporated county going into the future. I'm joined here today with Matt Broughton from Kittleson Associates, who's our consultant guiding us through this process, and he'll be here to share in the presentation with me. I also have Stephanie Holloway from Placer County Department of Public Works and Facilities to answer any maybe specific questions related to the county and the process. The intent is to highlight how we've gone through this process, what we've done to date, and then hit on the three main components for the bikeway plan, which is a bikeway network, which are the facilities that are proposed, priority projects that are identified that may be successful for future grant rounds, and some implementation and supportive type of programs that could later be implemented by Placer County staff. And then we'll finalize with any feedback questions we've received to date. I'll share those with you, received to date through the public or through our Bicycle Advisory Committee or Technical Advisory Committee. I'll share those with you, and then take any questions you may have and wrap up with acceptance of the document for purposes of the Caltrans Planning Grant that funded this study. And then at a later point in time this summer, fall, county staff will work to agendize this item to the Placer County Board of Supervisors for adoption. So as I mentioned, we started this process over a year ago to update the original 2002 Regional Bikeway Plan. This plan itself and this update focuses on identifying bikeways for the unincorporated areas of Placer County. Those bikeways are then married with the variety or the various plans adopted by each of the local jurisdictions to show a continuous and connected regional bikeway system. Also mentioned that the bikeways within the Tahoe Basin area, that those planning efforts that are led by the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency are also shown within this map to again show a continuous network of facilities. The focus on this update was to utilize best practices to develop the bikeway network. We know that cyclists are out there riding our rural roads, riding in the more urbanized areas of Granite Bay and adjacent to our cities. But a lot of thought has changed over a period of time on how you treat bikeways, where we have roads such as Auburn Folsom that is a very populated road for cyclists. They're adjacent to travel lanes with a posted speed limit of, I believe, 55 miles an hour now. And some motors may be going a little faster, so it's still a minimum of 4 foot or maximum of a 6 foot travel lane, the best practice in this point in time. And so we've looked at that and incorporated options to try to improve or enhance cycling in some of these areas. This plan is intended to promote and direct future statewide grant efforts. There's a significant amount of money in the Active Transportation Program, which has changed some of the landscape on projects that could be funded at the statewide level, and ultimately to complement the county's other efforts on their sustainability plan. We kicked off the project with outreach efforts. It was a large virtual community workshop that we enlisted the help with a consultant to deliver this. Given our regional, the geographic nature of Placer County, the variety of communities that we have, And we were pleasantly surprised with the results we had from our outreach efforts. We had received over 700 participants in a 7-survey questionnaire. We had over 250 comments on a interactive web map where people can come and identify different locations of interest for cycling or areas of concern, how they want to connect to other destinations. So we had a pretty thorough review and input across the county from each of the incorporated cities, the unincorporated areas, and Tahoe as well. That information helped form some of the basis and backbone for the bikeway network. We then took that bikeway network, the recommended network, out to our municipal advisory committees throughout the county, 11 different presentations from Tahoe Basin now to Sheridan and to Granite Bay and everywhere in between to solicit feedback on those bikeway recommendations. And throughout the entire process, our Bikeway Advisory Committee of a variety of cycling club members, residents from City of Roseville, Town of City of Colfax, have participated in this with a wide knowledge of the unincorporated area roadways to help us provide input, craft ultimately the plan before you today. With that, I'll change over the mic here and the role to Matt Broughton from Kittleson and Associates to help us identify those 3 main components of the bikeway network, the priority projects, and then the implementation of supportive programs throughout the county.
Thank you, Aaron, and good morning, members of the board. So as we discussed in April, the bikeway network, I wanted to start at a very high level again. So what I've shown here on this slide is the existing bikeway network and the mileage associated with that and the planned bikeway network. So as we discussed in our April presentation, a key part of this plan is moving to facilities that are appealing to a wider range of bicyclists, so trying to get to that all ages and abilities type of network and providing a greater degree of separation, as Aaron mentioned, between high speed and high volumes of motor vehicle traffic and bicyclists. And so what you'll see in the planned network is an increase in some of the newer types of facilities like buffered bike lanes or separated bike facilities, which are providing that physical separation from motor vehicle traffic, as well as an overall expansion to really emphasize connecting between and within the communities within Placer County. So stepping into just the map, very similar to what you saw in April. There have been some minor updates, particularly in some of the specific plan areas to kind of relegate the planning efforts that are going on within those specific plans. The bikeway network that will come out of that process will be adopted into this and really focusing in on the backbone bikeway facilities within those areas. So really just what are the most critical from a regional perspective and countywide perspective that we really want to show in that network. And then one other change I'd also like to just point out is along Highway 65, we've identified a couple areas where we would like to recommend that we look into finding opportunities for a bike or pedestrian crossing over there, just to make sure that as Western Placer County continues to develop and grow, that we're providing that connectivity between the Rockland, Roseville area and the growing area to the west. In central Placer County, the focus is a little bit more on connecting up into the communities of Colfax and Forest Hill, providing facilities, particularly in Forest Hill, to allow people to get around within that community. And then also you'll see a pretty wide range of bike routes identified there, which is really focused on connecting or allowing safer interaction between motor vehicles and bicyclists on key recreational routes that are currently used to climb up into the hills there. And one key consideration here is just recognizing the topography challenges within this part of the county, really that the opportunities to expand with those more separated facilities are more limited. So that's why we're focused more on the bike route as a facility, so increasing signing and providing a little bit wider shoulder where we have that opportunity. In eastern Placer County, the key focus here is really creating that and emphasizing that connection between the Tahoe Basin and Truckee being the most critical aspect there. So there's not a whole lot that's outside of the TRPA jurisdiction to focus on, but really it's connecting that Resort Triangle area and getting up into Truckee. In terms of what do we do? We've identified a lot of different projects. How do we really focus in and pick out those projects that we want to pursue for grant funding? So the prioritization methodology for this plan really focused on how do we pick out the projects that are going to help us find matching funds from other sources. So as Aaron mentioned, the ATP program and also the Highway Safety Improvement Program offer opportunities to fund bicycle improvements. And so really the criteria that were developed as part of this plan took into account both the concept that we want to connect and build bikeway networks within our communities, and then also we want to make sure that we're identifying those opportunities where we can get matching grant funds. And so based on that, the grant funding criteria from the ATP and HSIP were brought into the prioritization to help us make sure that we're identifying those projects that are going to be most competitive. Based on that, of the about 100-ish projects for the whole county, 19 were identified as being the most competitive under those opportunities. So they account for about 72 miles of bikeways, and it's about $33 million of planning level estimated costs to complete all of those projects. So again, the prioritization is really focused on emphasizing leveraging outside funding. So we want to make sure that we're bringing to the table what Placer County will be able to make those improvements, but then also identifying how we can match that with other funding sources. And I just want to also note that these priority projects don't preclude the county from pursuing other projects as opportunity arises. These were just those that popped up relative to those grant funding opportunities. And so just quickly show the table. So you saw this in the executive summary that was passed along with the packet. So really a range of facilities kind of across the county. In terms of implementation, so engineering, so putting projects on the ground isn't going to create a safe and comfortable biking environment by itself. And so a key part of this plan was also to identify a number of programs, practices, and policies consistent with what are called the 5 E's. So education, encouragement, enforcement, engineering, which we've talked about with the recommended network, and then evaluation. And a key thing of what we heard in the feedback was really how do we develop best practices around maintenance practices so that those bikeway facilities are clear and usable at all times. And then also, how do we clarify the rules of the road, both for motorists and for bicyclists, so that everybody understands what a proper interaction is. And so one of the key outcomes that we're hoping from this plan will be to pursue grant funding to help develop a marketing plan that will allow Placer County and PCTPA to conduct outreach to help clarify how to safely interact and effectively communicate between those two modes to create a healthier interaction between them.
If I could add on to that, I think going out to the municipal advisory committees and reviewing Appendix A in the document and looking through all the comments we received from online, those are probably two of the most, I think, telling of the sentiment out there on cycling is maintenance of the roadways from the cyclist perspective. Just the deteriorating pavement, but also when roads are repaved, that not only the travel lane, but also the bike lane or shoulder is also repaved or resurfaced also, because it does create a differential grade there that creates problems for the cyclist. So that was one of the biggest concerns. And then from the municipal advisory councils of, there's our committees, there's a number of cyclists who ride down the rural roadways from the incorporated area out of the county who live within the unincorporated area, and how do we try to improve on that? So those are some of the things that we can't touch on necessarily with the engineering side and planning, but through additional grant funding, we could attempt to try to improve on those areas to address those comments that we heard.
Yeah, and one last final thing. I think the 5th E there, evaluation, one of the also key recommendations coming out of this plan is to develop a process to monitor and evaluate how that improvement and how we are moving towards those goals and tracking the improvements that are being made going forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Aaron to wrap up, and then we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Matt. And just in closing, as we mentioned in the staff memo to you, that this was a draft final version. We have received comments while the document was out for review by the public from both members of the public, our technical advisory committee, and our bicycle advisory committee. Those comments that we received are generally editorial, in nature, some clarifications, just some misspellings that may have still remained within the document. I think the number one concern or comment that came in, though, was just trying to highlight on maintenance. And I think we mentioned that. It's a process by which county or other jurisdictions, including, can maybe look at how they deliver these projects. Oftentimes, or lowest bid for resurfacing projects may or may not always come in with the lens of a cyclist of what's important on those. So that's something that to keep in mind as a comment we received. Not sure necessarily that we changed the document for that, but it's something to keep in the back of our minds. And it is highlighted as an issue of concern within the document. Also, in the final document, we'll be adding a map to highlight those priority projects, recognizing that table is a great list, but visually portraying where those priority segments are across the county and where they reside locally is also important. So that will be part of our final document that we will end up publishing on our website and submitting to Caltrans for acceptance. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions that you have or open up to the public for questions or
Any
comments.
comments or questions?
Yeah, a couple questions. Thank you. Very pleased that we are here at this point, and pleased also by the list that I see. Quick clarification. I see Eureka Road is on the list. However, it defines the boundaries as being from Auburn Folsom Road to Eureka Road. Does that mean out to Wellington, where it hits at Wellington? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
So,
Is that
answer is yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Then you under project description, you have identified bike lane, shared use path, buffered bike lane, bike route, separated bike lane. Do we have illustrations of what those mean, or can you describe for us how a bike route is different from a bike lane, is different from a separated bike lane or a buffered bike lane? Because I'm not really sure what that's going to mean on the pavement.
Yes, we can do both of those for you. So within the body of the draft final report, it was not included in the executive summary, but in the final report, it does have examples of those types of facilities, both illustrative and narrative. Okay. And I can ask Matt to kind of go through what the differentiation is between a buffered bike lane versus a bike lane if you'd like to do so.
That's right. If you want to just, if it's in the report, I'll just look it up in the report and figure it out. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Going down here, any questions or comments?
I have one that I'd like a definition of or to see what it means, and that's in the same list that the good supervisor was perusing there. The bottom one that says State Route 267, and it defines Carnelian Woods Avenue to county boundary.
So that would be the completion of the bike trail along 267 from, and this may be a typo in here of the logical termini, but from the PCTPA, TRPA boundary into what I believe is North Star, over the summit.
And over the summit?
Or up to the summit, because once we drop down into the basin area, I believe the...
Okay, that just needs a better, because Carnelian Woods Avenue is down, way down in the basin, and from that point over to where I think you're talking is a little bit more than 6.7 miles, and it would be probably close to $13 million rather than $1 million.
Yeah.
That really needs to be looked at, if this is to be used for any guidance at all other than a list.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that is our kind of our last effort of, before this is finalized, making sure that all those I's are dotted.
That is a really important link in that since the early 90s, that loop around the whole resort triangle has been underway, and this is really the last section and the most difficult to get up and over the North Star Mountain and down to the lake. And I really don't think that can be done for $1 million a mile.
Correct, yeah. So we'll verify that in the final document.
Thank you.
And just to identify that these are planning level cost estimates, so the exact or the specific bikeway projects could vary potentially significantly, maybe just minor in some locations, given the terrain, given any right-of-way that's necessary, drainage, et cetera. So these are, again, are just kind of based on some statewide averages for these types of facilities.
Mr. Chairman, I did have one other question.
Okay.
Would you spend just a brief minute talking about the difference in funding in terms of both impact fees that we charge as various jurisdictions for these kinds of improvements, be they, I know in the county, typically this would fall under our facilities, parks, those kinds of fees that we would charge as opposed to the road fees. Sometimes specific improvements are required on a project-by-project basis that would accomplish some of this stuff. But speaking more to the issue of at a time when we are having difficulty properly maintaining our roads, why are we looking at $33 million worth of these kinds of improvements for cyclists? Why wouldn't we just take those $33 million and go fix our potholes in our roads? So if you could speak to how, from a federal level on down, over the years, these dollars have been segmented and separated out.
Exactly. That's the last keyword, segmented, is one of the challenges I think we all face with funding transportation. Is there are so many there's a number of fund sources out there. They're all siloed. They all have their strings, hoops, and hurdles you have to go through. So the priority list was identified for purposes of pursuing very specific grant programs that can only be used for bike and pedestrian uses. The active transportation program, the highway safety improvement program that focuses more on safety-related issues. So should county staff and the electeds decide to go after projects from these competitive programs, these would be some of the most competitive projects that they could pursue. Some of these do not have matches, so this could be all state or federal money. The active transportation program is a combination of both federal monies that have come down that are allocated to the state, and the state has developed this program. To get to there are other fund sources that come directly to Placer County and our local jurisdictions. The highway user tax fees, gas funded sources that are at your discretion to fill potholes, to widen shoulders. When these roadways are resurfaced, there's always the potential to add a little bit of shoulder, which has been done. I think was just done on Penryn Road between King Road and I-80 recently. And so that's one of those examples. If it's on the list, that can then be coordinated with the various staff. So we wanted to make sure there's flexibility and focused attention efforts on getting those additional monies to leverage what the county already has. I would let Stephanie talk more about impact fees and road fees if you like, about how those might be utilized, but those would have very specific uses as established by county and development agreements.
No, I think you touched on what I was getting at. Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that there's probably some projects on here, if you were to ask a cycling club member or two, that they'd really, really like to see in this top list. Those projects may not, though, have been the ones that we could get funded through the state on a competitive program.
Right.
So we've talked about that with them. We both acknowledge that there's probably two processes here at play, and
Also point out that there's in the proposed sales tax measure in 2016, there was about 30% of that was geared towards maintenance, a portion of which was for bike trails. And so we would estimate that if we move forward with a new sales tax measure, there would be a healthy portion still remaining in there for bike trails. And if SB1 is recalled, we would also probably take a look at that again to see, is there enough maintenance in there, or should we increase the maintenance cost because there's less gas tax if SB1 is recalled.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Open it up to the public. Any comment from the public?
My name's Captain Byers, and I'm a Placer County resident. Can you hear me? Okay. I asked the board to reject this plan of the regional bikeway plan. I see many areas of concern. So other than the funding, which was just touched on, I see grant money, but not enough to cover the $33 million total. Where will the funding be coming from? Transparency. I don't believe a thorough job was done letting the public know of this plan. I received the county newsletter and I've attended some MAC meetings and I don't recall hearing of this. I'm sure there's many who haven't. The public input was poor at best. In a year's time to get response from only 759 people is nothing. A better job needs to be done getting the public's attention. The findings did show that out of 759 responses, only 87% lived in Placer County. Of those, 83% rode for recreational purpose. You can see it's a very small number would benefit from such a plan. The picture options, which I did see in there, to select as choices were of no use, as clearly some styles are for the city and some for the country. Laughable is one selection of the shared path. As a favorite is the style on 89 on the River Road. Millions were spent on a beautiful trail and cyclists don't want to use it because they don't want to share it with walkers. I ask that you reject this draft and request a scaled down version, such as eliminating 89 Squaw Valley to Truckee. I believe the road is plenty wide to share. 89 to Squaw Valley to Tahoe City, known as the River Road, there's a bike trail already exists, they just need to use it. Forest Hill roads are plenty wide to share. Mosquito Ridge, I ask that there be a count of the number of bicycles and autos who use it in a week's time to get a snapshot to determine if it's really needed. Doubtful. Please give the public the opportunity to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 the priority of the roads selected in this plan. On some roads, hikers are prohibited. Some trucks, due to weight or length, are prohibited. Maybe bicycles should be prohibited on some roads. Let's face it, we can't reinvent the wheel for just a few. As it stands, this plan is a lot of time and money spent for a handful of people to use on a handful of bluebird days to enjoy for their recreation. Please reject this proposal plan until numerous changes are made, especially focusing on safety rather than recreation. When you make a list, please note the funding that grants that would be used for each road. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? With that, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Any more comments from the board?
Mr. Chair, can you explain the public outreach that's been done on this?
Yes, I can. The public outreach on this project, which our total budget with consultant is, I think, roughly $70,000, and primarily through a Caltrans planning grant. We knew that we had to find a way to effectively get out and reach out to the public. And the virtual community workshop through social media, through contacting chambers of commerces, city PIOs, a county PIO, newsletters, et cetera, was one of the ways that we could probably maximize our budget and outreach efforts the most, rather than sitting down in school gymnasiums or parks with people to go over this. I think we all know in some of those meetings we might receive a handful of individuals at the most on a planning type study such as this. So we felt that the commentary that we received early on, the breadth of it was sufficient, and probably more than we would have received otherwise. 87% of the respondents to the survey were Placer County residents. There are other people who enjoy Placer County and what we have to offer. We can tell that by the growth that we're seeing and the great schools we have and the networks and trails and everything else that's to offer here. There are cyclists who are out there currently riding on facilities that aren't safe, and so by planning for it, that can help us out. We did notice with the municipal advisory committee municipal advisory committees on the outreach, our newsletters, other updates, the recent paper and the article. I think it would have been challenging at best to reach out to all of the county residents, and I think we've seen that on other projects of the challenges. of trying to reach out and convey what we're doing to everyone and for everyone to know who we are. Prohibiting cyclists on roadways is another thing we heard from municipal advisory committees, where there are those challenges of riders riding two abreast on the roadways or long lines of cyclists. I believe most of the cyclists, I won't venture to guess on the number, but some of the cyclists get out there by riding or driving their cars to a park and ride lot, which if they're driving to the Ophir Park and Ride Lot area or Indian Hill Park and Ride Lot or in Lincoln, they're purchasing gas that then goes into the road maintenance funds, and Placer County chooses to use those funds, and our jurisdictions, how they choose to use those. So I think there's a handful of things in there that we cannot prohibit. And we have the plan laid out before you with recommendations that have been supported by our Bicycle Advisory Committee and input from the public that we had received. So I'll leave the final decision and direction up to you.
So you had, I guess you had a survey and you had 750 respondents. How many people received the survey? How many?
I don't know exactly how many received the survey versus how many chose or elected to participate in the survey. I don't have that number off the top of my head. It was really a social media online campaign working with PIOs again to reach out. We have a limited reach and very few, a smaller segment of the county know who we are and what we're doing. So we really had to rely on our partners to get this information out.
It seems like 750 respondents is quite a good number from my understanding of survey responses.
I was pleasantly surprised with that, but given the county's population, it seems like a relatively small number. I think also this type of planning study is somewhat self-selecting. If you have interest in cycling or you've had a negative experience with cycling, you would choose to participate in it. If you don't cycle, don't have or have a neutral opinion, you may not choose to participate.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Anybody else? Yes.
I'd just like to give a little other side of the story as a thumbs up to this bike plan. As my husband and I retired, we love to ride bikes. We just started riding bikes a couple of years ago, and with the advent of e-bikes, it's a lot easier with the pedal assist to bike a lot of places. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of places that I feel safe to bicycle, and some of these new bike lanes will make it easier for people like me. And the previous Tink was talking about seniors and what they do and the transportation needs. Well, maybe if you are medically unable to drive or whatever, yes, but a lot of seniors my age and my friends are taking up bicycle riding, and this will be a boon to people like us. We'll have more places that we can ride in our county, and I think it's a great plan. Thank you very much.
And then just to the comment that was provided earlier about Highway 89, the example that you gave about Highway 89 and the utilization of that bike path versus the roadway, you're right. The majority of your, shall I say, serious cyclists stay on the roadway because that bike path is being very heavily used by little kids on bikes with training wheels and their families. That's why when I ride up there, stay on the roadway. Yes, there are walkers and people with their dogs and the people coming off the river who stagger into the bike lane down there, but there are an awful lot of families with their kids on that bike lane between Tahoe City and Squaw Valley. And so that extension, I think, out to Truckee is certainly worth us pursuing. The last comment I'll make is perhaps not the best promotional photo to be using for this topic is the photo of a cyclist riding the wrong way against traffic so we might want to. Well, yeah, but against traffic as opposed to with traffic. So that was, we might want to think of a better promotional photo to use there. So anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, any more comments? All right, with that as an action item, can I get a motion?
I'd move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, now we're on to the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure update. More from staff?
Thank you, Board Chair. I'll be taking this item as well.
Okay.
Okay, now that I have my magic wand, we can continue on here. Approximately 3 months ago, we kicked off the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure project at your discretion after selecting a consultant to assist the county staff, City of Auburn staff, ourselves, and Caltrans on looking at how we close some of the sidewalk gaps along Highway 49. This project itself really comes out of the Measure M, where there's coordination between ourselves and Caltrans to look at how we improve upon Highway 49. And at that point in time, through the expenditure plan, it was looking at coordinated traffic signals throughout the corridor. It was improving sidewalks. It was adding bike lanes and landscaping. Well, with Measure M not passing, we've got a backup plan. I think we've always got a backup plan for a project on how we can try to deliver it to maximize the public benefit. So this is that project. The corridor extends from Interstate 80 all the way up to Dry Creek at the northern end. And also, this project is picking up on a lot of momentum and will be carrying momentum of things that are happening in the corridor. Placer County just recently completed about a half-mile worth of separated sidewalk and landscaping in front of the Bel Air Shopping Center from New Airport Road all the way almost up to Bell Road through that area. Caltrans is finalizing design plans to release for bid for constructing widened shoulders, Class 2 bike lanes throughout the entire corridor, and sidewalks at certain locations within the corridor that will be going out to construction next year. So there's a lot of momentum on changing the look and feel for Highway 49, and so this project is one of those that continues on with that. This presentation is going to be broken up into essentially 4 slides. The 4 slides focus in on the corridor and focus in on what is either occurring to date, will occur with the Caltrans project, and what this sidewalk gap closure project is recommending based on the discussions we've had thus far with our project development team, which again is representative of Placer County staff, City of Auburn staff, and Caltrans staff to look at how we fill these gaps within the corridor. On each of these maps, you're going to see the project extents for this segment, and you're going to see different color indicators, either blue for what is out there today on the ground that has recently been constructed by Placer County, or that will be within the next year constructed by Caltrans, or will go out to construction by Caltrans. Anything denoted in green are segments that we are considering and looking for feedback and direction from you on how we and where we deliver sidewalks within the remaining corridor to close these gaps. So in this segment from I-80 to Persimmon Terrace Road, that's right before the Gold Rush Chevrolet dealer there as you're heading up the hill, would have complete sidewalks with the exception of along the eastern portion right here where there's the eastbound on-ramp to I-80, and underneath the I-80 structure here where there's just not enough width to add sidewalks. But between Lincoln Way and In-N-Out is a good destination. You will be able to walk there with one crossing through a signalized intersection. The rest of the corridor would be proposed to have sidewalks throughout. The segment between Elm and Palm in front of the grocery outlet and through some other commercial uses here, we are looking at both in that location and on the west side to place the sidewalks in their ultimate location to accommodate the future widening of Highway 49 to its 6-lane status. That is something that's still on Caltrans' plans. We'll see how and where we get the money for that. That's not been identified, but at least we're going to attempt to locate those in the 6-lane ultimate location, should it not be a significant cost difference in locating it adjacent to the road right now. I'll move on to the next segment, unless you have any questions about the green areas here. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Our next segment here is picking up from Persimmon Terrace and continuing on all the way up to Luther Road. On this segment, there would be continuous sidewalks on the west-hand side of Highway 49 between Persimmon Terrace and Luther Road. We can look at the map where there's the green areas. The gap closure project would propose to construct sidewalks all throughout this location here. Again, looking at hopefully constructing them in their ultimate location to accommodate a future 6-lane roadway. But on the east-hand side, it's a little bit different story. on the east-hand side from Persimmon Terrace up to about the city of Auburn County boundary there at Nevada Street and Marguerite Mine Road. There are no sidewalks being proposed by our project development team. There's two significant issues here of why the proposal is not to construct sidewalks there. One, there's really only two destinations for someone to walk to. One is the Chevrolet dealership and the Subaru dealership. Beyond that, there's nothing else on the east-hand side, and I think the opportunity for development there is pretty minimal, given there's very little right-of-way, very little surface area because of the steep embankment that heads down to Marguerite Mine Road. Given the lack of destination, given that slope that may create some significant cost to construct retaining walls, the project development team has not recommended at this point in time to construct sidewalks there. As we continue from Nevada Street, Marguerite Mine Road, up to Luther Road, there are some walkable destinations along here. As we get to roughly Live Oak, or where the Weiss Canal is, that's where some of the grade and terrain changes, where again retaining walls would be needed to accommodate the significant drop-off. And there's also some riparian habitat that would be of environmental concerns. It's something that could be mitigated for, but again, both those items are an increase in cost opportunity. So with those factors and the knowledge that there is sidewalks being proposed, continuous sidewalks on the west-hand side, that's where the project development team is leaning towards at this point in time. So again, if there's any thoughts, directions that you would like to provide, we'd greatly appreciate that. Okay, moving on to our third segment here. We'll pick up again at Luther Road and continue on to Bell Road. This stretch has seen, as I mentioned earlier, about a half mile of recent sidewalks being constructed by Placer County between New Airport and roughly right here, I believe there's a Big Five, and then we get into another shopping center. So those are recently completed. Our efforts with the gap closure project would be to focus on the west-hand side where there's not currently sidewalks. There are some opportunities where we do have an option or two, actually at least two options, between Atwood and roughly Masters Court. There is a frontage road there called Drive-In Way. It's where the Jim Boy's Tacos is. There's a car wash, or was, I believe there still is a car wash there. There's a car wash there, yes, I know. So there's an opportunity there to either route pedestrians along Drive-In Way, where they're separated from the high speeds, the trucks, the dust, etc. Or we can maintain those pedestrians on sidewalks adjacent to Highway 49. Our consultant is looking right now at the difference in cost in doing that and some of the engineering related challenges, but those are two options we do have here. And I think if we were to look to go towards a driveway in facility and upgrading that, we would definitely need some signage, some clear signage to direct pedestrians over there. Otherwise, we still may see the occasional pedestrian adjacent to the road in the shoulder or in the bike lane. So that's something that we'll have to work with consultants on creating or delivering a creative and effective signage to direct them in the proper direction. Is there any preference at this point in time for, knowing that we don't have costs here to compare and contrast, but preferences for pursuing sidewalks along the Drive-In Way, the frontage road, or maintaining them adjacent to Highway 49? All right.
I would, I walk there all the time, and I just go down Drive-In Way. It's just safer, so I don't know why we put sidewalks on the 49. It just makes sense.
It's kind of an automatic thing, I would think. It's the safest and easiest way to go.
You're lazy.
Those are similar comments to what our project development team have echoed, and so we're looking at that as an option. The only location within this stretch that there wouldn't be sidewalks is underneath the west side of the Union Pacific overcrossing. There's a constrained, limited amount of width there. There will be sidewalks that will be constructed on the east-hand side, so that will be the one lone segment. And to wrap up the presentation here, our last segment is between Bell Road and Dry Creek. There's a significant amount of work to be done within this stretch of the corridor, primarily on the west-hand side of Highway 49, be connecting between Bell Road and Education Street, where it leads up to in between Rock Creek Elementary. From there, past Sutter Auburn Faith to Quartz Drive to the Auburn Greens neighborhoods. And then we do also have 2 mobile home estates or parks down at the most northern end that could benefit from sidewalks connecting to the bus stops that are within this stretch for Placer County Transit. So looking heavily at filling in all of those gaps on the west-hand side. East-hand side as well, however, there are some vacant parcels that could be developed, and I believe there is some, or has been interest in the past, and probably will continue to be interest on developing those sites. Should those sites be developed, there would be the requirements then for frontage improvements. So we are not pursuing sidewalks at this point in time from a roughly Education Street up to Loxley Lane, assuming that those will be built by future development. The one challenge in this area, and then there's also an opportunity in this area, is that Dry Creek crossing here, we will have to look at how do we span the creek, and for the most part try to stay out of the creek to minimize the environmental impacts. And so our engineers are looking at precast structure to span the entire width of the creek there. And again, pursuing that on one side only. There is another opportunity on Town Court in the Auburn Greens Homeowner Association area, where we can utilize that frontage road to direct cyclists, or sorry, switching hats, direct pedestrians onto Town Court there, rather than have them again adjacent to Highway 49. The sidewalks on Town Court are rolled curb type, could probably use some enhancements, and so we're looking at the cost to do that. I think the county staff has expressed interest that might be the more appropriate approach for sidewalks in this area. So we are working collaboratively on how to deliver those. So with that, that's an overview of what our project development team has recommended thus far, the work we've done. We'll be pursuing an active transportation program grant to try to find funding to construct these gaps this coming cycle. Applications are due July 31st, so we're working quickly and pushing our consultants to deliver what we need to apply for those fundings. The good news is through the statewide program, there is no match requirement. So we can come in asking for full cost to implement this project. We do have some cost already incorporated into the pre-construction, the work we're doing right now, that actually is a benefit, will give us some leveraging points within the grant. So we won't know for probably another 8 months of whether we're successful on the grant should we submit it. So that is our intent. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any other remaining comments, take direction you have to help frame this project and how we move to submitting a grant, as well as how we ultimately create a shelf-ready project that we can look for funding to construct when funds become available.
Any questions from the board? Comments? Any questions or comments from the public?
Hank Miller again. I'll just respond to the driveway side street comment. My office is in Atwood Business Park, and I and my staff always walk up and down driveway because it's much safer than walking out on the freeway. So I would encourage that sidewalk go down driveway in.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Put my glasses on again. Item O, Executive Director's Report.
Yes, and given the time, I will be very brief in my remarks. Starting my 7th week of my journey of learning everything about Placer County transportation, so that's going very well. Just wanted to make sure and point out that on your dais today is the most recent quarterly update for the 65 Phase 1, I-80 Phase 1 project. I'm sure some of you have seen the video that's out there for the project. We'll continue to do that on a quarterly basis, and will help us in terms of informing the public on that project. Wanted to also let you know that we're related to that. We're still working on having the Fox 40 do a morning segment on that. I've been working with some of the members on the board to continue to promote the progress and what that interchange improvement means to Placer County. So we've had a couple interests from some regional media, and we're going to follow through on that. We are also working on a very important project to the town of Colfax, the roundabout project. We're working with Caltrans and the town of Colfax to bring that project to fruition. We've had to involve the district director, Amarjeet Benapal, in that project, and we're hoping to conclude some last-minute changes that Caltrans wants to pursue with that project and get that project on the construction timetable. Lastly, we're working with the city of Roseville on a renewed effort to work with our partner at CCJPA on a phase 2 of the third track project and looking at a more aggressive working style with pursuing that project, both with Caltrans and with CCJPA. Lastly, I wanted to introduce our newest staff member, Kathleen Hanley. We just added Kathleen to our staff with Scott Aaron departing and going to Nevada County in our associate planner position. You authorized an assistant planner position in our budget. Kathleen comes to us by way of Harvard University, where she got her bachelor's degree, and University of Pennsylvania, and working for the city of Philadelphia. So I'll let her maybe say a couple little remarks here, but I would ask that you welcome her to our staff. She's also a lifelong resident of Placer County.
Yes. Hi, nice to meet all of you. As Mike said, my name is Kathleen Hanley. This is my day 3 here at PCTPA, so happy to be at my first board meeting. I just did a 6-year stint on the East Coast, but I'm really happy to be back home in Placer County and really excited to bring my good 18 years of growing up here and knowledge about our good county to my work here at PCTPA, so I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you, and that concludes my report unless you have any questions.
Okay, is there any questions, comments? Questions, comments, public question, comments? All right. With that, item Q, informational items, you got anything on that one? Mike?
No, sir, but I would point out that at this point in time, we do not have any items for the July meeting, so we would ask that you cancel the July meeting and move to the August regular meeting as the next regular meeting date. We would also cancel the TAC meeting for July, if that's your pleasure.
Okay. And I skipped one here, P, the board direction of staff. Does anybody have anything they want to give staff?
We do meet the 4th Wednesday and not the 5th when there is the 5th in August?
Correct. 4th Wednesday. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, with that, meeting adjourned.